All right, welcome to another lesson summary. So this is an overview that goes with the teacher support pack on technology and cognition. So we're still looking at positive effects. These are 3 topics in the unit. And in the last 2 lessons, we looked at how computer games can improve working memory and how VRT can cause new learning. And so now we're going to look at Facebook and self-esteem. And I'll say this again, and I've tried to make it really clear, that I included this really for relevance and how important it is for students. I think that when they wrote the guide, there's so much research in looking at the effects of social media on our on students' anxiety and depression and things like this. And I feel like they might have liked to have had students learn about things like Facebook and self-esteem, Facebook's link with anxiety, depression, etc. But because it's not strictly cognition, then it doesn't really work for the exams. So this lesson's included, but feel free to skip it if you because I wouldn't recommend students write about this on exam day. But I am going to teach it because I think it's the lessons to be learned here are really valuable. All right. So we're looking at self-image, and so self-image is you could define it as a cognitive process or social cognition about how we think about ourselves, but it might not be accepted in an exam. Okay, so I think we should begin with what is cognition, and the reason I like to do this is because a lot of students lose marks in exams because they write about non-examples. So it's really important, just if you're thinking about exam prep, just drilling students what are cognitive processes and what are the examples of cognitive processes. Right, so they might write about, sometimes my students talk about things like fear and aggression as cognition because they think, it starts in the mind, and while that's true, it's not strictly a cognitive process. Another clip about VRT, this is just to recap what we did in the last lesson. And then I get students to discuss, do they think Facebook is a good thing for teens to use or not? And try not just think about its utility, about connecting with people, but also trying to get them to introspect on the effects of their own mental health and mental health of teenagers and how it influences relationships. Right, and then maybe discussing other social media as well, like Instagram, which is more popular than Facebook now, I think, with kids. All right, now this is a really interesting talk by Bailey Parnell. So it's 15 minutes, and she talks about the social media and how it can affect mental health. But then she also, I think, makes a very good conclusion, which is social media is not going anywhere, so we really need to figure out how to deal with it. And there are guiding questions in the workbook to help students focus as they're watching that video. And personally, I think this video in itself is worth this lesson. It's really good for students to try and think about this stuff. Okay, so now the second part is like a research activity. One partner is going to use the textbook and explain how Facebook can have a positive impact on self-image. So that's really just the key point of the lesson. Now the second partner has a harder job of trying to find out why social media might be addictive. Now this isn't really about cognition, but it's looking at the effects of social media. So again, not so much for exam prep, but just for its relevance. And I put a note in the notes for the slide with the link to a resource from Harvard if students have a hard time finding their own resources about why social media is addictive. Alternatively, you could have 2 students work together on this and then 2 students work together on that, and then they figure out a group of 4. That could be another way of doing this activity. But it's really just getting students to understand from the information in the textbook, this first one, how Facebook can have a positive impact on self-image. It's because people, when they change their profile picture and they change their things, how they're displayed on Facebook, it can make them feel better. The study suggested that. But then we want to look at the flip side as well, right? The addictive side of social media and how it works with our brain chemistry. And so here is the study here from Gonzalez and Hancock. And then I like this, putting a slide up here because it projects on the whiteboard, and then I can handwrite the notes in here as we talk about it and as students share about it. And that tables come straight from the workbook. So they have that the space for notes in their workbook as well. All right, and then we're looking at how might Facebook affect our self-image. That's the end of that lesson, but again, not so much for exam prep, but I think a very relevant lesson for students nowadays to learn about. And that is the end of the first topic. And then the next topic, we're going to look at the negative effects of technology on cognition.